Dr. Marcus Hayes was known for his steady hands, sharp mind, and unwavering dedication to his patients. At St. Vincent's Hospital, he had quickly become one of the most respected surgeons on staff. Patients praised him for his kindness, while colleagues admired his ability to handle even the toughest cases with precision, but not everyone shared this admiration. Dr. Gregory Langston, a senior surgeon who had been at the hospital for over 30 years, couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling whenever he saw Hayes in action. To Langston, Hayes represented something he didn't fully understand, a black man excelling in a field where people like him were still underrepresented. Langston wasn't openly hostile. Instead, he masked his discomfort behind subtle remarks and passive-aggressive behavior. During surgeries, when Hayes led the team, Langston would question his decisions aloud, often planting seeds of doubt among the younger residents. "Are you sure that's the best approach?" he'd ask during critical moments, making it seem like a harmless inquiry but leaving lingering uncertainty in the air. His tone always carried just enough skepticism to make others second-guess Hayes's expertise. One day, during a particularly complex procedure involving a car accident victim, tensions reached a boiling point. The operating room buzzed with activity as Hayes directed the team with calm authority. Everything seemed to be going smoothly until Langston stepped in unexpectedly, challenging Hayes's choice of sutures mid-operation. "That might not hold up under pressure," Langston said loudly, his voice cutting through the sterile hum of the OR. Hayes paused briefly, meeting Langston's gaze before continuing without missing a beat. He knew better than to let distractions derail him, especially when lives were on the line. What neither doctor realized was that someone else was watching closely: Amelia Carter, the hospital administrator. Amelia had inherited her role after her grandfather founded the hospital decades ago, and she took immense pride in maintaining its legacy of excellence. That day, she happened to be observing the surgery from behind the two-way mirror, conducting routine evaluations of her staff. What started as a standard check-in soon turned into something far more intriguing. Amelia noticed how Langston hovered near Hayes, interjecting unnecessarily and casting sideways glances filled with thinly veiled disdain. It struck her as odd, especially since Hayes appeared completely composed and highly skilled throughout the operation. As the hours passed, Amelia found herself focusing less on the patient's condition and more on the dynamic between the two surgeons. She had heard whispers about Langston being difficult to work with, but seeing his behavior firsthand painted a clearer picture. Why did he seem so determined to undermine Hayes? Was it professional jealousy, or was there something deeper at play? These questions lingered in her mind long after the surgery ended successfully, leaving her eager to dig further into what she had witnessed. Little did anyone know, this moment would set the stage for a chain of events that would change the lives of everyone involved. The tension in the operating room that day lingered long after the surgery ended. For Dr. Marcus Hayes, it was just another reminder of how challenging it could be to navigate a workplace where not everyone welcomed him with open arms. He brushed off Langston's comments as he always did, focusing instead on ensuring his patient recovered smoothly. But deep down, Hayes couldn't ignore the growing unease. It wasn't just about one disagreement during surgery. It was part of a larger pattern, one that had been building for months. Dr. Gregory Langston wasn't done. If anything, the incident in the OR only fueled his determination to push Hayes out of the hospital. Over the next few weeks, Langston began a calculated campaign to discredit him. During lunch breaks, he casually mentioned to other doctors that Hayes might not have the experience needed for such high-stakes cases. In meetings, he raised questions about Hayes's decision-making, framing them as concerns for patient safety rather than personal bias. And when no one was looking, he made small but significant changes to patient records, adjusting timelines or omitting details, to create inconsistencies that could later be used against Hayes. At first, Hayes didn't notice these subtle manipulations. He was too busy juggling surgeries, consultations, and rounds, pouring all his energy into his work. But soon, the effects of Langston's efforts became impossible to ignore. Colleagues who once greeted him warmly now seemed hesitant to engage in conversations. Nurses who used to double-check procedures with him started second-guessing his instructions. Even some patients began asking if they could request a different doctor, a rare occurrence before this wave of doubt spread through the hospital. Hayes felt the walls closing in around him. Every day brought new challenges, whispered remarks, behind closed doors, skeptical looks during team briefings, and an overall sense of isolation. Yet, despite the mounting pressure, he refused to let it break him. Instead, he channeled his frustration into proving himself even further. He meticulously documented every step of his surgeries, kept detailed notes on each patient's progress, and ensured his outcomes remained flawless. His dedication never wavered, even as the environment grew increasingly hostile. Meanwhile, Amelia Carter continued to observe everything from a distance. After witnessing the dynamics in the operating room, she decided to pay closer attention to Langston's behavior. She reviewed patient files handled by both surgeons, comparing their success rates and post-operative care outcomes. What she found puzzled her. Hayes consistently delivered excellent results, often surpassing expectations. Yet, complaints about him kept surfacing, almost exclusively from Langston. Something didn't add up. Amelia also noticed something else: how quiet everyone else was staying. Other doctors and nurses avoided taking sides, fearing retaliation or being drawn into the conflict. Some genuinely respected Hayes but hesitated to speak up, worried it might harm their careers. Others simply didn't want to get involved, choosing instead to stay silent, while the tension simmered beneath the surface. As days turned into weeks, Amelia grew more convinced that there was more to this story than met the eye. Langston's actions weren't random, they were deliberate and targeted. But why? Was it professional rivalry, or was there a deeper motive driving his behavior? Determined to uncover the truth, Amelia resolved to dig deeper. She installed additional surveillance cameras in key areas of the hospital, not because she distrusted her staff, but because she wanted to ensure transparency. Little did she know, those recordings would eventually reveal far more than she anticipated. For now, though, the battle lines were drawn. Hayes worked tirelessly to maintain his reputation. Langston plotted his next move, and Amelia watched silently, waiting for the right moment to intervene. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake St. Vincent's Hospital to its core and change the lives of everyone involved forever. The tension between Dr. Marcus Hayes and Dr. Gregory Langston reached its breaking point when a high-profile case landed on the hospital's doorstep. A wealthy donor's son, injured in a car accident, was rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital for emergency surgery. The complexity of the procedure required the most skilled hands available, and the hospital board unanimously agreed. Dr. Hayes would lead the surgical team. Langston, however, was livid. He stormed into the pre-op meeting, slamming his folder onto the table. "This is absurd," he declared, his voice sharp enough to cut through the room. "Dr. Hayes doesn't have the experience for a case this delicate. We're talking about someone with immense influence here. If anything goes wrong, it'll reflect poorly on all of us." His words hung heavy in the air, but no one dared to agree openly. Hayes sat quietly, his expression calm, though his jaw tightened slightly. He knew what Langston was doing, trying to plant doubt where none existed. Despite Langston's protests, the decision stood. Hayes prepared meticulously for the surgery, reviewing every detail of the patient's condition and mapping out each step of the procedure. He refused to let Langston's interference distract him. The night before the operation, Hayes barely slept, going over notes and rehearsing scenarios in his mind. This wasn't just about saving a life, it was about proving himself once again, and showing that Langston's attempts to undermine him were baseless. But Langston wasn't done fighting. In a bold and underhanded move, he filed a formal complaint against Hayes before the surgery even began. The document accused Hayes of negligence, citing vague examples of alleged mistakes from past cases. It was a preemptive strike, designed to cast doubt on Hayes's abilities and protect Langston if the surgery didn't go perfectly. Langston submitted the complaint directly to the hospital board, bypassing Amelia Carter entirely. He assumed she wouldn't intervene, given her neutral stance so far. When Hayes learned about the complaint, he felt a mix of anger and frustration, but not surprise. By now, he had grown accustomed to Langston's tactics. Instead of reacting impulsively, he focused on the task ahead. On the day of the surgery, Hayes walked into the operating room with determination etched across his face. Every movement was deliberate, every decision precise. For hours, he worked tirelessly, guiding the team through the intricate procedure. When the final stitch was placed, the room exhaled collectively. The surgery had been a success. The patient recovered quickly, thanking Hayes profusely and praising his skill to anyone who would listen. News of the successful outcome spread throughout the hospital, silencing many of Langston's critics, at least temporarily. But Langston still clung to his complaint, using it to rally support from skeptical colleagues. He argued that Hayes's performance during the surgery was irrelevant. What mattered, he claimed, was protecting the hospital's standards. Slowly but surely, he pushed for an official review of Hayes's credentials and conduct. What Langston didn't realize, however, was that he had made a fatal mistake. Unbeknownst to him, Amelia Carter had installed surveillance cameras in key areas of the hospital after noticing irregularities in his behavior. These cameras captured everything. Langston altering patient records late at night, making derogatory remarks about Hayes to other staff members, and even admitting in hushed tones that his actions stemmed from personal bias rather than professional concern. Amelia reviewed the footage carefully, her suspicions confirmed with each frame. She saw how Langston manipulated situations to paint Hayes in a negative light, all while maintaining a facade of professionalism. The recordings revealed a side of Langston that shocked even Amelia, a man driven by prejudice, willing to jeopardize both careers and lives to satisfy his own insecurities. For Hayes, the aftermath of the surgery brought little relief. Though the patient's recovery was a triumph, the looming investigation cast a shadow over his achievements. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, one thing became clear. Someone was watching. Someone who held the power to expose the truth and ensure justice was served. As events unfolded, Hayes remained steadfast, trusting that his hard work and integrity would eventually shine through. What he didn't know was that the person observing from the sidelines might just hold the key to turning the tide in his favor. Dr. Marcus Hayes was no stranger to challenges, but the weight of Langston's relentless campaign began to wear on him. The stress of defending his reputation while continuing to perform at the highest level left him feeling isolated and drained. Though he tried to stay focused, the constant whispers and sidelong glances from colleagues made it clear that Langston's efforts were taking a toll, not just on Hayes but on the morale of the entire surgical team. It was during one particularly difficult evening, as Hayes sat alone in the hospital break room reviewing patient charts, that Dr. Priya Patel found him. Priya had always admired Hayes's dedication and skill. She had witnessed Langston's behavior firsthand, the subtle jabs, the unnecessary questioning, and the way he seemed to go out of his way to make Hayes look incompetent. Sitting down across from him, she said gently, "Marcus, you don't have to do this alone. I've seen how hard you're working, and I know none of these accusations are true. Let me help." Her words carried sincerity, and for the first time in weeks, Hayes felt a flicker of hope. Together, they devised a plan. Priya suggested gathering evidence to counter Langston's claims. They would collect testimonials from colleagues who respected Hayes's work and meticulously document every successful surgery he performed. Priya also encouraged Hayes to reach out to Amelia Carter, the hospital administrator. "She's been watching," Priya said confidently. "If anyone can see through Langston's games, it's her." Hesitant but desperate for a solution, Hayes decided to take Priya's advice. He requested a private meeting with Amelia, unsure of what to expect. When he entered her office, Amelia greeted him with a calm but serious demeanor. Before Hayes could speak, she leaned forward and said, "Dr. Hayes, I think it's time we talked about what's really going on here." Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was measured, almost protective. Hayes hesitated briefly before opening up about everything: Langston's comments, the altered records, and the growing hostility among the staff. Amelia listened intently, her expression unreadable. When Hayes finished, she nodded slowly. "I've noticed some concerning patterns myself," she admitted. She then revealed that she had installed surveillance cameras in certain areas of the hospital after becoming suspicious of Langston's actions. While she didn't share specifics, she assured Hayes that she was building a case to address the situation fairly. "Keep doing what you're doing," she advised. "Stay professional and avoid escalating things publicly. Trust me, this isn't over yet." Though relieved to hear that someone in power was finally stepping in, Hayes couldn't shake the uncertainty hanging over him. Word of the brewing scandal began spreading among the hospital staff, dividing opinions. Some rallied behind Hayes, recognizing the injustice of Langston's behavior. Nurses who had worked closely with Hayes spoke highly of his bedside manner and technical expertise, while younger doctors expressed admiration for his mentorship. Others, however, distanced themselves, unwilling to risk their own positions by taking sides. Langston, meanwhile, remained oblivious to the fact that his actions were being recorded. Emboldened by the support he'd garnered from a few like-minded colleagues, he doubled down on his efforts to tarnish Hayes's reputation. He held informal meetings with senior staff, painting himself as a guardian of the hospital's standards, and Hayes as a liability. Yet cracks began to form in his facade. A handful of doctors quietly questioned his motives, especially when they noticed inconsistencies in the examples he cited to criticize Hayes. As tensions simmered, Hayes found solace in the small victories. Colleagues who had once doubted him started reaching out, offering encouragement or simply acknowledging his contributions. Even patients began speaking up, praising Hayes's care and demanding answers about the rumors circulating around him. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. But the battle was far from won. For now, Hayes continued to focus on his work, knowing that every stitch, every diagnosis, and every life saved added weight to his side of the story. With allies like Priya and Amelia in his corner, he allowed himself to believe that justice might prevail. But as the investigation unfolded behind closed doors, one thing was certain. The truth was closer to coming out than Langston realized, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Amelia Carter wasted no time. After her meeting with Dr. Marcus Hayes, she launched a discreet yet thorough investigation into the allegations against him and Dr. Gregory Langston's behavior. She knew that handling this situation required precision. Any misstep could jeopardize not only Hayes's career, but also the reputation of St. Vincent's Hospital. Amelia began by reviewing patient records, comparing outcomes from surgeries led by both doctors. The results spoke for themselves. Hayes consistently delivered excellent care, often surpassing expectations, while Langston's work showed occasional lapses in judgment. But Amelia didn't stop there. She conducted interviews with staff members, carefully framing her questions to avoid bias. Nurses who worked closely with Hayes praised his calm demeanor under pressure and his ability to connect with patients. One nurse recounted how Hayes stayed late to comfort a frightened child before surgery, ensuring the family felt heard and supported. In contrast, many described Langston as intimidating and overly critical, especially toward younger or minority staff members. Though some were hesitant to speak openly, fearing retaliation, their accounts painted a troubling picture of Langston's conduct. The surveillance footage proved to be the most damning evidence. Amelia reviewed hours of recordings, piecing together moments that revealed Langston's true intentions. There he was, late at night in the records room, altering details in patient files to cast doubt on Hayes's decisions. In another clip, he stood near the nurses' station, muttering racial slurs disguised as casual complaints about certain types of doctors. Each frame confirmed what Amelia had suspected all along. Langston's campaign against Hayes wasn't about professional standards. It was rooted in prejudice. What shocked Amelia most was discovering a pattern. She dug deeper into the hospital's archives, uncovering similar incidents involving other minority doctors over the years. Several had left St. Vincent's after clashes with Langston, citing hostile work environments but never filing formal complaints. Their stories mirrored Hayes's, right down to the subtle sabotage and public undermining. It became clear that Langston had operated unchecked for far too long, protected by seniority and fear of confrontation. Armed with irrefutable proof, Amelia prepared to present her findings to the hospital board. She compiled a detailed report, including excerpts from the surveillance footage, testimonies from staff, and statistical comparisons of surgical outcomes. Before the meeting, she met privately with Hayes to update him on her progress. "I won't lie to you," she said. "This is going to get messy, but I promise you we're going to handle this fairly." Hayes nodded, gratitude evident in his eyes. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. When the day of the board meeting arrived, tensions ran high. Amelia laid out her case methodically, presenting each piece of evidence with clarity and conviction. The room fell silent as the surveillance footage played, showing Langston's discriminatory remarks and manipulative actions. Board members exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. When asked to respond, Langston grew defensive, accusing Hayes of being too ambitious and claiming his methods were unorthodox. But his arguments lacked substance, crumbling under scrutiny when confronted with hard facts. One board member, visibly frustrated, turned to Langston and said, "This isn't about ambition or methods. This is about fairness, and it's clear that you've crossed a line." Others echoed similar sentiments, condemning Langston's behavior as unprofessional and unacceptable. By the end of the meeting, the decision was unanimous. Langston would be suspended immediately pending further disciplinary action, and an official apology would be issued to Hayes for allowing such discrimination to persist unchecked. As news of the verdict spread through the hospital, reactions varied. Some cheered quietly, relieved to see accountability finally enforced. Others expressed disbelief that Langston, a towering figure in the institution, had fallen so dramatically. For Hayes, the outcome brought vindication, but also reflection. He knew the fight wasn't just about him. It was about every doctor, nurse, and staff member who had ever felt marginalized or silenced. And though the scars of the ordeal would linger, Hayes emerged stronger, ready to rebuild trust and continue serving his patients with the same passion that defined him. The fallout from the hospital board's decision rippled through St. Vincent's like a storm. For Dr. Gregory Langston, the suspension was a devastating blow, one that shattered not only his career, but also his carefully constructed image of authority and respectability. Stripped of his privileges and isolated from colleagues who once revered him, Langston retreated into himself. Rumors swirled about what he might do next. Some speculated he'd fight back, filing lawsuits or appealing to higher authorities. Others assumed he'd quietly retire, disappearing from the medical world altogether. But regardless of his future plans, one thing was certain: Langston's legacy at St. Vincent's was irreparably tarnished. For Dr. Marcus Hayes, however, the aftermath brought a mix of relief and renewed purpose. The official apology from the hospital board validated everything he had worked so hard to prove, that his skills and dedication deserved recognition, not discrimination. Yet Hayes knew this victory wasn't just personal, it was symbolic. It sent a message to everyone at St. Vincent's and beyond, that talent and professionalism should always outweigh prejudice. As word spread about how the situation had unfolded, Hayes became an unintentional figurehead for change within the hospital community. Colleagues who had previously hesitated to support him began stepping forward, offering apologies and expressing admiration for his resilience. Nurses who had witnessed Langston's behavior firsthand thanked Hayes for enduring the ordeal with grace, admitting they wished they'd spoken up sooner. Even senior doctors, many of whom had stayed silent during the conflict, now acknowledged their own complicity in allowing such discrimination to persist unchecked. Slowly but surely, the atmosphere at St. Vincent's began to shift. Conversations about diversity, inclusion, and accountability became more frequent, sparked by Hayes's courage in standing firm against injustice. Amelia Carter played a pivotal role in ensuring these conversations translated into action. Determined to prevent another incident like this, she implemented sweeping changes across the hospital. Mandatory bias training sessions were introduced for all staff members, from surgeons to administrative assistants. Anonymous reporting channels were established, allowing employees to voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Amelia also created mentorship programs aimed at supporting underrepresented groups in medicine, personally inviting Hayes to help shape its framework. "You've already inspired so many," she told him. "Let's make sure no one else has to face what you did." Hayes embraced this opportunity wholeheartedly. He began mentoring younger doctors, particularly those from minority backgrounds, sharing not only his technical expertise but also advice on navigating challenges in the workplace. His story resonated deeply with them, a testament to perseverance in the face of adversity. Outside the hospital, Hayes used his platform to advocate for broader systemic changes in healthcare. He gave talks at conferences, wrote articles for medical journals, and collaborated with organizations focused on increasing diversity in medicine. Each step reinforced his belief that progress required both individual effort and collective action. As weeks turned into months, the transformation at St. Vincent's became undeniable. Morale improved among staff, who felt empowered to speak openly about issues affecting their work environment. Patients noticed the difference too, commenting on the warmth and inclusivity they experienced during visits. While there was still work to be done, the seeds of change had been planted, and Hayes was proud to have played a part in nurturing them. Langston, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Though a small group of loyalists tried to defend him, claiming he was simply old-fashioned or misunderstood, most viewed his downfall as a long-overdue reckoning. Some pitied him, seeing his actions as a product of outdated beliefs rather than malice. Others saw justice served, believing that anyone guilty of such blatant discrimination deserved to face consequences. Through it all, Hayes remained focused on the future. He understood that victories like this were milestones, not endpoints in the ongoing fight for equality, and while scars from the battle lingered, they served as reminders of how far he, and those around him, had come. For Marcus Hayes, the journey wasn't over, but every step forward made the road ahead brighter, clearer, and full of possibility. Months had passed since the upheaval at St. Vincent's Hospital, and life within its walls began to settle into a new rhythm. The changes Amelia Carter implemented were slowly taking root, reshaping the culture of the institution in ways both subtle and profound. For Dr. Marcus Hayes, the transformation was deeply personal. Once seen as an outsider fighting against invisible forces, he now stood as a respected leader, a beacon of resilience and integrity for colleagues and patients alike. Hayes's days were busier than ever, but they carried a different kind of weight. No longer burdened by constant scrutiny or whispered doubts, he moved through the hospital with confidence, his presence commanding respect rather than suspicion. His name appeared on more high-profile cases, and patients specifically requested him, drawn not only to his skill but also to his compassion. In the operating room, he led teams with calm authority, earning trust from even those who had once doubted him. Younger doctors sought his guidance, eager to learn not just surgical techniques but also how to navigate challenges with grace and determination. But Hayes didn't stop there. He embraced his role as an advocate for change, using every opportunity to push for greater inclusivity in medicine. At conferences, he shared his story, not as a tale of victimhood but as a call to action. "Discrimination doesn't always look like shouting," he would say during one such speech. "Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's subtle actions that make you question your place. But we can't let fear keep us quiet. We have to speak up, for ourselves, for each other, and for the future of this field." His words resonated deeply, inspiring countless healthcare professionals to reflect on their own experiences and commit to fostering safer, more equitable workplaces. Back at St. Vincent's, the mentorship program Hayes helped design flourished. It became a cornerstone of the hospital's efforts to support underrepresented staff members, pairing them with senior doctors who could provide guidance and encouragement. Hayes took particular pride in mentoring young Black surgeons, reminding them that their voices mattered and their contributions were invaluable. "You belong here," he often told them. "Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Amelia Carter watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. She knew the road ahead wasn't without obstacles. Old habits die hard and some resistant attitudes lingered. But she saw undeniable progress. Staff meetings felt more collaborative, conversations more open, and decisions more inclusive. Patients benefited too. Satisfaction scores soared as people noticed the warmth and care emanating from every corner of the hospital. Amelia's grandfather had built St. Vincent's on principles of excellence and compassion, and she felt proud knowing she was steering it toward a brighter, fairer future. Langston, meanwhile, remained a distant memory for most. Though whispers about him occasionally surfaced, they were tinged with pity rather than admiration. Some former colleagues reached out to him after his suspension, hoping to mend bridges, but Langston rejected their attempts, retreating further into bitterness. Eventually, he resigned quietly, leaving behind a legacy defined by missed opportunities and misplaced priorities. Few mourned his departure, and fewer still mentioned his name. For Hayes, closure came not in anger or triumph over Langston, but in the relationships he rebuilt and strengthened along the way. Nurses who had once hesitated to collaborate with him now greeted him warmly, trusting his judgment completely. Fellow surgeons invited him to co-author research papers or lead innovative projects. Even some of Langston's former allies approached, Hayes apologizing for their earlier silence and vowing to do better moving forward. These moments of reconciliation reminded Hayes that healing wasn't limited to individuals. It extended to communities willing to grow together. As time went on, Hayes reflected on how far he'd come. The scars of the past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they no longer weighed him down. Instead, they served as reminders of his strength and resilience. Every successful surgery, every grateful patient, and every inspired mentee reinforced his belief that the fight for equality was worth it. And though challenges still lay ahead, Hayes faced them with hope, knowing he wasn't alone anymore. Together, he and those around him were building something stronger, fairer, and infinitely more meaningful. A legacy rooted not in division, but in unity. Months turned into a year, and St. Vincent's Hospital felt like a different place altogether. The once tense atmosphere had given way to an energy of collaboration and mutual respect. Dr. Marcus Hayes stood in the operating room where it all began, the same room where Dr. Gregory Langston had tried so hard to undermine him. This time, however, the air was filled with calm assurance. Hayes led his team through a complex surgery, guiding them with precision and confidence. His steady hands moved with purpose, and his voice carried authority without arrogance. When the final stitch was placed, the room erupted in quiet celebration. Another life saved, another victory earned. As Hayes removed his gloves and mask, he glanced toward the observation window out of habit. For a moment, he thought he saw Amelia, Carter watching from behind the glass just as she had done during that fateful surgery months ago. Their eyes met briefly before she stepped back, giving him a small nod of approval. It was a silent acknowledgement, a reminder of how far they'd all come since then. Hayes smiled faintly, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known before. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was thriving. Outside the OR, Hayes walked down the hospital corridors, greeted warmly by colleagues and patients alike. Nurses stopped to thank him for his guidance during rounds, while younger doctors eagerly shared updates on their cases, seeking his input. Even patients who had heard about his story approached him to express gratitude, not only for his medical expertise, but also for standing up against injustice. "You've inspired us," one elderly man said, gripping Hayes's hand firmly. "Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like." Hayes's influence extended beyond the hospital walls. The mentorship program he helped create continued to grow, attracting aspiring doctors from underrepresented communities across the country. Many of these young professionals credited Hayes with helping them find their footing in a field that often felt unwelcoming. One mentee, a bright young woman named Dr. Elena Ruiz, told Hayes how much his support meant to her. "When I started, here I doubted myself every day," she admitted. "But seeing you lead with such confidence made me realize I belong here too. You've changed my life." Amelia Carter remained a steadfast ally, ensuring that the changes at St. Vincent's stayed permanent. She introduced new initiatives aimed at fostering diversity and inclusion, including scholarships for minority students pursuing careers in medicine. Her grandfather's legacy of excellence now stood alongside a renewed commitment to fairness and equity, values she believed were essential for true progress. During a hospital-wide address, Amelia praised Hayes publicly, calling him a catalyst for change. Dr. Hayes reminded us all why we're here, she said, to heal, to serve, and to uplift each other. That's the kind of institution we strive to be. Meanwhile, whispers of Langston's downfall served as a cautionary tale within the hospital. His name occasionally surfaced in conversations, but always as a reminder of what happens when prejudice overrides professionalism. Some former colleagues expressed regret for not speaking out sooner, vowing never to let fear silence them again. Others simply moved forward, determined to build a better workplace culture. The shadow Langston cast over St. Vincent's had lifted, replaced by rays of hope and unity. For Hayes, the journey wasn't about revenge or vindication. It was about proving that perseverance could overcome even the deepest prejudices. He knew there would still be challenges ahead, both for himself and for others fighting similar battles. But he faced them with optimism, knowing he had allies beside him. As he prepared for another surgery later that afternoon, he paused for a moment, looking around the bustling hospital. This was his home now, a place where talent and determination mattered more than bias, where everyone had a chance to succeed regardless of background. And though scars from the past lingered, they no longer defined him. Instead, they fueled his resolve to keep pushing forward, for himself, for his patients, and for the countless others who deserved a fair shot at greatness. With a deep breath and a renewed sense of purpose, Hayes stepped back into the OR, ready to face whatever came next.